Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the call over to your host from the Census Bureau. Nadal, you may begin.
Thank you, Anthony. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the August Local Employment Dynamics, or LED webinar. First, a few quick housekeeping items. If you have questions during the presentation, please add your questions into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner, and we will read them out loud once we conclude. The chat has been disabled to our attendees at this time. On behalf of the U.S. Census Bureau and the LED Partnership, in collaboration with the Council for Community and Economic Research and the Labor Market Information Institute, it is my pleasure to welcome Cameron Macht as he presents Analyzing Economic Disparities Related to Race and Ethnicity in the Labor Force Using Census Data. Using demographic details from census data, researchers with the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, or DEED, Labor Market Information Office, have started publishing a series of reports on Minnesota's labor force and economic disparities by race and ethnicity. African Americans and Hispanic or Latino residents in particular face some of the greatest disparities in our country and in Minnesota. One thing we hear consistently is that disaggregated data by race is essential. So Cameron Macht is the regional analysis and outreach manager at the Minnesota DEED, supervising a team of 5 regional analysts that provide labor market information to support workforce and economic development efforts across the state, as well as other analysts at DEED headquarters providing tools and research. He has 20 years of experience working in DEED's Labor Market Information Office, as well as prior career practice in marketing, market research, and economic development. Cameron has a bachelor's degree in organizational management and marketing from the University of Minnesota Duluth. With that, I welcome Cameron. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, Nadal, and thanks so much for inviting me and for the opportunity to present on this important research that we've been doing in the state of Minnesota. So my name is Cameron Macht, and I'm the Regional Analysis and Outreach Manager in the Labor Market Information Office at the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. My plan is to go through this presentation in about 30 minutes and then open it up for questions and discussion at the end. So I ask that you'd hold your questions until the end or send them in the Q&A section, which is monitored by my colleagues at the Census Bureau. Please note that as I go through the presentation, I'm using language that is used by the Census Bureau and the related data sets that we gathered information from, but I also recognize that different people use different terminology. Our goal in doing these reports was to provide disaggregated data to help our state understand the economic challenges we face and explore opportunities to make things better. Though data show that some disparities have been lessening over time, Black or African Americans and people who identify as Hispanic or Latino still face disparities in our country and state, as foundational systemic barriers to prosperity persist. As policymakers, community leaders, businesses, and workforce leaders craft approaches to remove these barriers, one thing we hear consistently is that disaggregated data by race and origin is extremely important. Understanding the demographic trends and scope of disparities is an important tool for crafting stronger solutions. In 2022, Minnesota's Labor Market Information Office undertook a process to provide an updated look at some of the major demographic, labor force, economic, and educational trends and disparities in the Black and Hispanic or Latino populations in Minnesota. I will discuss those reports in this presentation. But first, a little background. So the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development is the state's principal workforce and economic development agency. DEED programs promote business recruitment, expansion, retention, international trade, workforce development, and community development, among many other things. DEED facilitates an economic environment to produce jobs and improve the quality of the state's workforce. Our mission is to empower the growth of the Minnesota economy for everyone. I work in our state's Labor Market Information Office. Our data and data tools offer a comprehensive look at Minnesota's economy and workforce. We provide and analyze data on employment, unemployment, wages and occupations, regional and state comparisons, and much more. We believe that state and local governments can use data to make smarter decisions. Our labor market experts, including regional analysts, provide information on the economy and labor market in Minnesota, as well as career exploration tools and resources. We are led by LMI Director Angelina Nguyen and Assistant Director Oriane Casal. I am fortunate enough to manage a team of high-performing regional analysts that are stationed throughout the state, serving customers with localized research and expertise. We do hundreds of presentations each year and reach thousands of local stakeholders with customized research and analysis. It is a fun and rewarding job, and we strive to make a positive difference in people's lives. So as noted earlier, DEED has identified systemic racial inequality as one of the biggest impediments to our growth in our state. For example, 27% of Black Minnesotans are living below the poverty line in our state, compared to 7% of white Minnesotans. And the COVID-19 pandemic led over 2/3 of all Black workers in our labor force to apply for unemployment insurance, compared to 35% of people from the white community. Those disparities just scratch the surface. Inequality is present in many aspects of our state's economy. Identifying and improving these trends is vital to meeting our agency's mission to empower the growth of the Minnesota economy for everyone. Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan care deeply about inclusive economic growth and have encouraged us to meet this moment for racial equity in our economy to build a stronger future for everyone. That being said, our work in each of these areas is very much in progress. We've got a lot of work to do, and progress has many variables, both within and outside of our control, including legislative decisions and administrative actions. But we're focusing on the things we can control, and we believe that the more transparent we are about our journey, the stronger our agency will be. As noted, understanding the demographic trends and scope of disparities is an important tool for crafting stronger solutions for communities. This analysis offers an updated look at some of the major demographic, economic, and educational trends and disparities in the Black and Hispanic communities in Minnesota. We used a wide variety of data to produce these reports, including the Census Bureau, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, our Labor Market Information Office, and data from the Minnesota Department of Education and Office of Higher Education, as well as links to outside reports that have examined other facets of racial discrepancies in our state. Of interest to this presentation, we use quarterly workforce indicators to provide details on changes in employment by race and ethnicity over the past couple of decades, and especially during the pandemic recession. So for those of you not from Minnesota, you may not have a strong understanding of our demographic profile. So just like the purpose of writing and sharing this report, it's important for us to all have the same context. This is an easy to use polling feature from polleverywhere.com. So you can actually respond by scanning the QR code in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, or by, if you're viewing this online, you can go to pollev.com/DeedRegional167, or by sending a text by typing DEED Regional 167 and sending it to 22333. Now, I know it might be dangerous to tell you to take your cell phone out during a presentation, because that may encourage you to be looking at other things instead of paying attention to what I'm talking about. But I thought it would be interesting to see what everybody thinks about Minnesota's population. Whoop. So the question is, what percentage of Minnesota's population is a race other than white alone? So far, it looks like the guesses are coming in most strongly for 12.5%. Less strongly for 2.5%, and then 22.5% and 32.5% are kind of equal there. Interesting. So the perception, at least, is accurate that Minnesota is a less diverse state than some other states. So you can continue texting in if you like, or continue responding. But I'm going to keep moving on in the presentation. So among the 50 states, Minnesota has the 22nd largest population overall, with 5,706,494 residents, according to the 2020 U.S. Census. And we have the 23rd largest Black or African American population, with 398,434 people. So at 7% of the total population, Minnesota had the 28th highest percentage of Black residents. But Minnesota also had one of the largest and fastest increases among all states from 2010 to 2020. In comparison, the Black alone population increased 5.6% in the US overall. Minnesota was home to nearly 400,000 residents who reported Black or African American alone as their race in the 2020 census, though that number is larger, closer to 450,000 people, when a combination of Black with one or more other races is considered. While the state's population grew 7.6% over the past decade, the state's Black or African American alone population increased 45%, the equivalent of more than 124,000 new residents, accounting for just over 30% of the state's total population growth. Likewise, Minnesota was home to more than 345,000 residents who reported Hispanic or Latino origin, accounting for 6.1% of the state's total. The state's Hispanic or Latino population increased 38%, the equivalent of more than 95,000 new residents, accounting for nearly a quarter of the state's total growth during that time. Data clearly show that Minnesota's population is rapidly becoming more racially diverse. So we designed some Tableau visualizations to display this data. Among the 50 states, Minnesota had the 29th largest Hispanic or Latino population, with just over 345,600 people. At 6.1% of the total population, Minnesota had the 38th highest percentage of Hispanic or Latino residents, compared to 18.7% nationwide and a high of 47.7% in New Mexico. Now, Minnesota is not alone in the Midwest in terms of relatively low racial and ethnic diversity, with our surrounding states showing similar demographic details. Among neighboring states, Wisconsin ranks 32nd, Iowa ranks 37th, South Dakota ranks 44th, and North Dakota ranks 46th, which is 4.3% of the population reporting Hispanic or Latino origin. Though Minnesota still has a relatively small Hispanic or Latino population, the 38% increase over the past decade was both the 28th largest and 28th fastest increase among all states from 2010 to 2020. In comparison, the Hispanic or Latino population increased 23% in the US overall since 2010, putting us well above the national rate. So due to a younger age profile and a large number of births over the past 2 decades, a much higher percentage of Minnesota's Black population is under 35 years of age than the state's white population, which shows a much older age profile. Over 28% of the state's Black population is under 15 years, compared to less than 19% of the total population, while just 6% of Black Minnesotans are 65 years and over, compared to 16.8% of the overall population. In sum, 38.2% of the state's population is in their prime working years, between 25 and 54, compared to 41.6% of Black Minnesotans. Likewise, a much higher percentage of Minnesota's Hispanic or Latino population is under 35 years of age. Nearly 30% of the state's Hispanic or Latino residents are under 15 years of age, while just 4.5% are 65 years and over. 40.7% of Hispanic or Latinos in Minnesota are between 25 and 54 years of age, leading to a vital and growing workforce. All 6 Minnesota regions saw a rapid increase in both Black and Hispanic or Latino residents over the past decade, though the vast majority reside in the 7-county Minneapolis-St. Paul Twin Cities metro area. The largest percent and number of Black or African Americans reside in the Twin Cities, while greater Minnesota is less racially diverse. Southwest Minnesota had the highest concentration of Hispanic or Latino residents at 7.9%, followed by the Twin Cities, Southeast, and Central, while both Northwest and Northeast had much lower percentages. The largest number of Hispanic or Latino residents live in the 7-county Twin Cities metro area, with just over 226,500 people, accounting for 65.5% of the state's total Hispanic population, compared to 55.4% of the state's total population that lives in the Twin Cities. However, the top 14 counties with the highest percentage of Hispanic residents in the state are all located in greater Minnesota. As one of the most diverse counties in the state, Nobles County, which is home to Worthington in southwest Minnesota, has nearly 1/3 of its population reporting Hispanic or Latino origin. Likewise, almost 30% of the population in Watonwan County in south central Minnesota, which is home to St. James, is Hispanic or Latino. Kandiyohi County, which is where I live, is home to Wilmer. Austin is located in Mower County. Freeborn County has Albert Lee. Stevens County has Morris. and Rice County has Faribault, which all have higher than average concentrations of Hispanic residents. And I'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. So in addition to a natural rate of increase, which means that there were more births than deaths, Minnesota's Black or African American population has also been growing through rapid international in-migration. Between 2010 and 2021, Minnesota welcomed over 112,000 new foreign-born residents, including more than 63,000 new immigrants from Africa. Africa was the largest and fastest growing continent of origin for immigrants to Minnesota, and is now the second largest source of foreign-born residents in the state after Asia. With nearly 85,500 residents, the largest number of African immigrants in Minnesota are from Eastern Africa, most notably Somalia and Ethiopia, followed by Western Africa with 32,500 residents, with the largest numbers from Liberia and Nigeria. Detailed data from the IPUMS USA database show that just over 125,000 of Minnesota's Black residents reported Africa as their birthplace. Likewise, Minnesota's Hispanic or Latino population has also been growing through international in-migration. Because recent growth was much faster from Africa and Asia, Latin America is now the third largest source of foreign-born residents in the state. With about 58,000 residents, the largest number of Latin American immigrants in Minnesota are from Mexico, with another 20,000 from other Central American countries. There are also about 25,000 immigrants from South America, which featured the fastest growth over the past decade. The rising tide of foreign-born in-migration of Hispanic or Latino residents to Minnesota started with a total of about 12,000 immigrants in the 1980s, rising to nearly 30,000 people in the 1990s, then a peak of just over 40,000 in the 2000s, before dropping back down to about 20,500 immigrants in the 2010s. The number of new Hispanic or Latino immigrants dropped to less than 1,000 people in 2020 as the coronavirus pandemic changed migration patterns. Interestingly, only 34.3% of immigrants from Latin America reported being naturalized U.S. citizens, compared to 55.7% of all foreign-born residents. So Minnesota is well known for our hard work ethic and our high labor force participation. But among the different race groups, which one has the highest labor force participation rate in Minnesota? Again, you can please use poll everywhere to respond. Be curious to see what people's perceptions are, what their guesses might be. I see quite a few responses coming in. What's interesting is when we give these types of presentations in state as well, we also have people who have different perceptions than what reality actually is in Minnesota. You can certainly continue responding, but I'm going to jump to the next page here. So at 77.5%, workers of Hispanic or Latino origin actually had the highest labor force participation rate in the state of any race or origin group. And their rate was more than 10% higher than the state's white rate, which was 67.2%. At 70.5%, Minnesota's Black or African American labor force participation rate was the third highest of all states in the U.S. and was higher than the state's white rate. Workers of two or more races, of some other race, and Asian or Pacific Islanders also had higher rates than the state's white rate, while only American Indians had a lower labor force participation rate than white Minnesotans. The increase of nearly 57,000 Hispanic or Latino workers from 2011 to 2021 accounted for more than 1/3 of the state's total gain of just under 160,000 workers during that same time frame. While Minnesota's Black and Hispanic or Latino labor force have increased, the state's white population has continued aging, and the white labor force participation rate actually declined over the past decade. More recent data from the current population survey, which is shown in the chart on the lower left-hand side, shows that these long-term trends and how they accelerated during the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, and even into 2022 as well. While the white rate declined steadily from 70% in January of 2020 to 67.1% in March of 2023, the Hispanic or Latino rate actually increased from 76.2% to a peak of 80.4% in August of 2022, but was back down to 76.1% in March 2023. Long term, the Hispanic or Latino labor force trend line is pointed upward, while the state's white labor force participation trend line is on a slow but steady decline. American Community Survey data estimated more than 191,000 Black workers in Minnesota in 2021, up from about 121,000 workers in 2010. That increase of more than 70,000 Black workers over the past decade accounted for just under half of the state's total gain, highlighting the importance of Minnesota's changing demographics to our workforce. Overall, at 68.4% in 2021, Minnesota's labor force participation rate was the fourth highest in the U.S., behind D.C., Utah, and Nebraska, and was much higher than the country as a whole, which was at 63%. Comparing data using the 2021 American Community Survey, Minnesota's Hispanic or Latino labor force participation rate was third highest in the U.S., behind D.C. and North Dakota. Interestingly, according to detailed IPUMS data from the 2020 ACS, the labor force participation rate for U.S.-born Hispanic or Latino Minnesota residents was 75.9%, compared to 78.4% for foreign-born Hispanic or Latino residents. This shows that foreign-born workers are ready to work and quickly join the labor force, but both rates are comparatively high and show the importance of Hispanic or Latino workers in Minnesota's economy. The data clearly show that Black or African Americans in Minnesota were more immediately impacted by the recession, not just in falling labor force participation rates, but also in rising unemployment. Over time, Minnesota has had a significant gap between its white and Black unemployment rate, with the Black rate typically being at least twice as high as the white rate. Going back to 2010, in the depths of the Great Recession, the Black unemployment rate was 16.7% in Minnesota, which was essentially triple the white rate of 5.6%. At that same time nationally, the Black unemployment rate was 14% and the white rate was 6.8% in 2010, showing Minnesota had a higher rate and a bigger gap for Black or African American workers. Among the 50 states in DC, Minnesota had the fifth highest rate for Black people in 2010 and the fifth largest gap between the white and Black rate. But over the course of the decade, employment prospects for Black or African Americans improved in Minnesota. At 8.7% in 2020, Minnesota had the 26th lowest unemployment rate for Black people in the US, though the rate was still 2.5 times higher than the white rate at 3.2%. Minnesota still had a large disparity between the two, but it was now down to the 11th largest gap in the US, showing improvement over the decade. As Minnesota's economy continued to grow and the labor market grew tighter in 2019 and 2020, the gap was closing even more all the way up until the pandemic. Based on 12-month rolling averages, the Black unemployment rate in Minnesota had dropped as low as 4.5% in February and March of 2020, just 1.5% above the white rate of 3% in both of those months. More recent estimates show the Black rate dropping in line with and even below the white rate, but it's also important to note that these estimates are from a very small sample size in our state. The trends are encouraging and demonstrate Minnesota's tight labor market situation, how it's leading to better employment outcomes. Similarly, going back to 2011 at the end of the Great Recession, the Hispanic or Latino unemployment rate was 11% in Minnesota, which was well above the white rate of 6.7%, a gap of 4.3%. At that same time nationally, the Hispanic or Latino unemployment rate was 12.5% and the white rate was 8.9%, showing that Minnesota had a lower rate but a bigger gap for Hispanic or Latino workers in 2011. Among the 50 states in DC, Minnesota had the 30th highest unemployment rate for Hispanic or Latino residents in 2011, but the 20th largest gap between the white and Hispanic or Latino rate. But as shown by the increase in labor force participation and employment over the course of the decade, employment prospects for Hispanic or Latino workers improved in Minnesota. The unemployment rate had dropped to 5.8% in 2019 before the pandemic, though that was still the 13th highest unemployment rate for Hispanic or Latino residents in the US at the time. So we can demonstrate how these labor force changes are impacting our economy using data from the Quarterly Workforce Indicators program. If you aren't familiar with the site, here's a quick overview of how to access the data and use it for analysis. So you can see in my screen on the lower right-hand side, this is a screen capture from the Census Bureau's QWI Explorer tool. You'll see, and I have a link to that in the presentation. You'll see up at the top that you are able to select your state from the geography level. So I have, in this case, chosen Minnesota, but you can certainly choose whatever state you're interested in. Below that, then there are a variety of different indicators that you can look at, including hires, separations, turnover rate, earnings, and so on. For the sake of this report and presentation, I'm just going to focus on the employment numbers, and this is the beginning of quarter employment. If you have any questions about what the indicators are, where the data comes from, there's a fantastic methodology and overview document available on the Census Bureau's site right before you get to QWI Explorer. The default has now changed, so it's helpful to go in and select firm ownership and then select all ownership rather than private ownership, just so that you get a better picture of the entire economy. And then you'll see that in the lower right-hand side, you have the ability to select different variables, including firm age, size, worker characteristics, and then there's an x-axis and group drop-down menu. So on the x-axis here in my example, I'm showing yearly averages, but you can also select quarterly data, and the QWI data gets updated on a very regular basis. The data is available through 2022 at this point. And then under the group drop-down menu, there's a lot of different variables that you can also select, including age, gender, race, ethnicity, and educational attainment. In this case, I'm selecting race and ethnicity. Once you have selected the variables that you're interested in looking at, you'll see that there is a button toward the top that says Get Data. If you click on that, it allows you to download it as a CSV or a spreadsheet file so you can manipulate the data. There's also a QWI extraction tool that is very helpful, but I don't have an example of that in this presentation. The other benefit that you can get from using this data is you can do some additional detailed analysis from the left-hand set of filters and aggregations. The geography selection, you can actually choose either counties, metropolitan or micropolitan areas, or WIAs, which is workforce investment areas. Those are designated groupings of counties or cities within your state that align with the Workforce Investment Act. You can also then select industries. So if you go to click on the link next to industries, you can select NAICS sectors, and this is 2-digit, so things like construction, manufacturing. You can also do 3-digit and 4-digit level data. So you can not just manufacturing, but you could actually look at food manufacturing, and then not just food manufacturing, but you could look at like animal slaughtering and processing or dairy food manufacturing or things like that. So a lot of different options, a lot of different detail that you can gather from quarterly workforce indicators. All right, so based on that information, what you know about the state of Minnesota, or what you know about your own state, what industry do you think employs the largest number of Black or African American job holders in the state of Minnesota? And if you're still following along, you should have a chance to click in. All right, we're getting some responses here. All right, so it looks like people's perceptions are split between accommodation and food services, which would include hotels and restaurants and so on, and then healthcare and social assistance, and maybe also retail trade. So while the majority of Minnesota's total jobs are held by workers reporting as white, recent and historical trends show that the state's workforce is becoming increasingly racially diverse each year. The answer, in case anybody is curious right away, I'll share it on the next slide as well, is healthcare and social assistance, and it's far and away the largest employing industry for Black workers. So workers reporting as Black or African American held about 3.6% of the state's total jobs in 2000, which increased to 4.8% in 2012 and to 7% in 2022. Despite the pandemic recession, Minnesota's total employment still increased 7.6% from 2012 to 2022. This was equivalent to about 200,000 additional jobs. At a more detailed level, the number of jobs held by those reporting as white increased 2.1% during this time, while jobs held by those reporting as a race other than white increased by about 50%. Black or African American workers witnessed the largest numeric increase in jobs held between 2012 and 2022, adding approximately 70,800 jobs. Data clearly show that Minnesota's economy would not have been able to expand without our growing diverse labor force. So QWI also provides detail on the industries that these workers hold jobs in. With more than 67,000 jobs, about 13.3% of the state's healthcare and social assistance workforce is Black or African American, which is the highest concentration of any industry. In 2021, well over 1/3 of Black or African American Minnesotans held jobs in the healthcare and social assistance industry, after increasing more than 330% from 2000 to 2021. That was more than 4 times as many who worked in the next most popular industries: manufacturing, retail trade, and administrative support and waste management services, which includes temp health and staffing agencies. Workers reporting as Hispanic or Latino held about 2.7% of the state's total jobs in 2000, which increased to 3.7% in 2012 and to 5.6% in 2022. After the severe job loss due to the pandemic recession in early 2020, Minnesota's economy began adding jobs again in late 2020 and throughout 2021 and 2022. According to QWI data, Minnesota had an average of 2.8 million jobs in 2022. And broken down by race, nearly 6 in 7 jobs were held by persons reporting as white, while Hispanic or Latino workers accounted for 5.6% of the state's jobs in 2022. Hispanic or Latino workers witnessed the second largest numeric increase in jobs for non-white workers between 2012 and 2022, adding approximately 56,000 jobs. With nearly 26,500 jobs, the largest number of Hispanic or Latino workers are employed in the manufacturing industry, accounting for 8.5% of total employment in the industry. While the total number of manufacturing jobs dropped 22% from 2000 to 2021 in Minnesota, the number of Hispanic or Latino workers in manufacturing increased by 57%. And most notably, 11,685 Hispanic or Latino job holders work in the food manufacturing subsector, which is easily the largest number of any subsector. Latinos account for 24.8% of total employment in food manufacturing. And while food manufacturing cut jobs by 3.3% from 2000 to 2021, the number of Hispanic or Latino workers rose by 49.7%. Food manufacturing firms have recruited and retained Hispanic or Latino workers for decades, which also helps explain the regional concentrations in those greater Minnesota cities that I highlighted earlier. Interestingly, the fastest and largest increase in employment for Hispanic or Latino workers occurred in healthcare and social assistance, which jumped from 4,671 jobs in 2000 to 20,659 jobs in 2021, a 342% expansion. Hispanic or Latino residents now account for 4.1% of jobs in the industry, up from just 1.6% in 2000. Interestingly, while jobs in healthcare and social assistance dropped by 2% from 2019 to 2020, the number of jobs held by Hispanic or Latino workers increased by 2.5%, as these workers took on jobs that were hard to fill in the midst of a pandemic. Healthcare employment then jumped by another 7.6% for Hispanic or Latino workers from 2020 to 2021, outpacing the overall industry recovery of 3.9%. The next 3 largest industries for Hispanic or Latino workers are accommodation and food services, retail trade, and administrative support and waste management services. Hispanic or Latino employment also ramped up more than 155% in retail trade and doubled in accommodation and food services from 2000 to 2021. So moving forward, we have used QWI data in industry-specific reports to help with workforce strategies. For example, we recently completed industry profiles for manufacturing, healthcare and social assistance, educational services, and construction in support of our Governor's Workforce Development Board, which is convening sector partnerships with employers in the state. The QWI data show that manufacturing has become one of the more racially diverse industries in the state. In 2022, 82.7% of job holders reported being white alone, compared to 5.5% Black and 8.9% Hispanic or Latino. In contrast, construction is much less racially diverse, but has seen rapid growth in the past 10 years. In 2022, 94.1% of job holders in construction reported being white alone, compared to 2.1% Black and 5.2% Hispanic. However, over the past 10 years, there was a 36% increase in jobs for whites, compared to a massive 143% increase for workers of other race or ethnic groups from 2012 to 2022. Industries that are less diverse can use this information to tap into untapped pools of labor and learn from best practices in other industries. So just quickly, like Black or African American workers are more likely to be employed in certain industries, there are also differences in the occupations that are held by Black people. Using detailed data from the IPUMS USA database, you can see what the most common occupations for Black or African American Minnesotans are, and compare that to other race groups. So for example, some of the most common occupations for Black or African American Minnesotans include personal care aides, nursing, psychiatric, and home health aides, registered nurses, and that reflects that high concentration of employment in healthcare industries. You can also use IPUMS to see a comparison between native-born and foreign-born Black or African American residents, and there are some slight differences. Likewise, you can see more detailed occupational information for Hispanic workers. Common occupations for Hispanic workers include chefs and cooks, janitors, cashiers, maids and housekeeping cleaners, retail salespersons, and food preparation workers. One thing that's interesting is a lot of these occupations can be started with a high school diploma or less, relying more on the job training rather than post-secondary education. There are certainly some occupational groupings that show high concentrations of Hispanic or Latino or Black or African American workers. And without more time, I won't go into the full details from the reports, but would like to note that they include data on other topics, including educational attainment and trends over time, as well as breakdowns for native-born versus foreign-born residents. We've also done some analysis and presentations on educational activities and outcomes for students by race or origin from Minnesota's statewide longitudinal education data system, or SLEDS, which shows the percent of students that attend college, graduate, or enter the workforce. My colleague, Alessia Liebert, has done some excellent research on disparities in educational outcomes by race and ethnicity that are also published on our site that I would highly recommend reading if you have time. We also include data on income and poverty by race and ethnicity from the Census Bureau, as well as some limited data on business ownership, both for employer establishments and non-employer establishments. The business ownership data is also published in a Tableau visualization on our site, which I have a link to there at the bottom. We are also working on new reports for American Indian and Alaska Natives, and then Asian and other Pacific Islanders, with the goal of publishing those later this year. So our mission is to empower the growth of the Minnesota economy for everyone. Understanding the demographic trends and the scope of disparities is an important tool for crafting stronger solutions for communities. I'll do my best to answer any questions you might have. Thanks again for the opportunity to present. I hope that you found it valuable to see an example of how our state is using data to make economic progress.
All right, thank you, Cameron.
Yes.
Very good presentation, very nice. Before we get to the questions though, I just want to note that the presentation will be accessible at the Census Academy website. So it's census.gov/academy. And you can look for that in a couple of weeks. And I think we have also added a link to the chat as well. So again, please type all of your questions in the Q&A. And if you can make sure your questions are focused on today's presentation, that would help things as well. All right.
Okay, Cameron, I have quite a few questions here. So the first question is, when I see data indicating that labor force participation rates of Black and Hispanic workers have moved abruptly in opposite directions, I generally think that's indicative of sampling error. Do you think that's a reasonable interpretation of the results shown for late 2022?
Yeah, absolutely. And we are aware that the sample size for the current population survey in the state of Minnesota is small. So we know that like month to month changes can sometimes be related to that. But if you look at the long-term trends, we are definitely seeing, positive movement in the state of Minnesota, and it's incredibly valuable because our labor force growth has been slowing down in recent decades as the state's white population has been aging and aging out of the labor force. So seeing high labor force participation rates and growth in these other areas has been extremely valuable.
All right, the next question is, didn't WIOA replace WIA in 2014?
Yeah, so that's just a term that's used on the QWI Explorer site. They're now called workforce development boards rather than workforce investment areas, workforce service areas. They all mean the same thing.
Great. And the next one is a kind of a two-part. So the first part is, so Hispanics are basically like first responders in concentration in healthcare, discrepancy with frontline workers. And then the follow-up was, or really both first responders and frontline workers increased.
I don't have a great definition of frontline workers, but certainly in Minnesota, you can see through the QWI data that Hispanic or Latino workers took on a large number of jobs in healthcare and social assistance at the front end of the pandemic, and have stayed in healthcare and social assistance more long term. I guess some of the other industries that were probably identified or most closely related to frontline workers, like retail, trade, accommodation, and food services, also will have higher concentrations of workers that are Hispanic or Latino.
All right, and the next question, is there a link to the report? So,
Yep, so if you go to our website, which is mn.gov/deed/data, you can see we have a quarterly report, a publication, I'm sorry, called Minnesota Economic Trends. And both the report for Black or African Americans and Hispanic or Latinos are included in the Minnesota Economic Trends publication.
is the report link also in your PowerPoint?
That's a great question. I don't believe so, but I can certainly add it and send that back to you in the PDF if you share it afterwards.
That would be great. And then the next one is, if possible, could you repeat the link to where the recording will be posted, which is census.gov/academy. All right, I don't have any other questions. Did anyone want to type another question into the queue? All right, Nadal, I don't have any more questions.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon, and thank you, Cameron, for the outstanding presentation. Please join us as our LED webinar series continues on September 20th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, when the San Diego Association of Governments, or SANDAG, data science team presents Studying Workers' Travel Patterns to Employment Centers Using Census Data. On behalf of the U.S. Census Bureau, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and again, thank you for spending your time with us.
That concludes today's conference. You may disconnect at this time.